The show is The Adults in the Room. I'm not alone in the studio, but before I tell you who is in the studio with me, I'd like you to tell a friend to tell a friend. I'd like you to tell a friend who has been thinking about adoption. I'd like you to tell a friend who has been thinking that adopting a child is difficult. I'd like you to talk to that family member that they could be having fertility issues and they're thinking maybe not. This is the conversation for you. And I would also like to tell you to tell that particular friend who has been thinking, maybe I need another child. Maybe I need to give up. I have some money to surplus amount. You know those people? You know them. Some of you are they your friends. I want them to plug into this conversation. So on today's show, we have an advocate of the High Court, Mr. Eliud Ngugi. You all know him. He's a friend to the show. He's been here and he always sheds some light. I'm one of those people who has actually been thinking about the adoption process in Kenya. And who knows, if God grants me that mullah that I want, I would have to actually adopt and add another letter to my park. If you are joining in, Mr. Eliud Ngugi, how are you?
I'm okay.
Have you been?
I've been good.
Should I be saying Merry Christmas, Happy New Year? Because this might be the last time I'm seeing you.
Yeah, you better start wishing me.
I was hoping you'll come with a
Merry
gift.
Christmas.
I will be coming for me.
Who knows? Somewhere.
Now, let's get into the business of the day. Adoption is one of those things that people know happens, but many of us think it's for the rich. It's for the influence. It's for those people who have opportunities. Why do you think we think like that?
I think we think like that because we may not have the understanding of what really adoption is.
Yes.
And probably the people who we see around us who are adopting children or a child either tend to be wealthy.
Yes. And then they put it on for social media and they make it look so glamorous.
Yes, like a certain celebrity.
Yeah, and it makes us scared. I'm thinking, can I afford it?
It's not a matter of the cost.
Okay.
I think it's more of the desire to have another child.
Okay.
Yes.
It's the desire. So we put costs aside just for a moment. We say the desire that makes someone want to go that extra mile.
Yes, it's a desire to go the extra mile. And the desire maybe to even take care of the less fortunate around us. And so that's why most of the people go for adoption.
Okay.
Because maybe you've fallen in love with a child, you've visited a children's home, or you have a relative who may have left one of the children and you want to actually permanently take up parental responsibility to become the parent to that child.
I like where we're going. And what are the types of adoption available in our country?
So there are three types of adoptions available in our country. There is a foreign adoption, whereby either the child is a foreigner,
okay,
or the parents are foreigners and they do not have a citizenship for this country. The
ones that come to Kenya and then they fall in love with the child.
Yeah, they fall in love with the child, and so that is called the foreign adoption type of adoption.
Yes.
So we have that foreign adoption. Then we have local adoption, whereby either it could be the child is a local, or rather is a Kenyan, and also the parent is also a Kenyan.
Okay.
So that becomes a local adoption.
Okay.
Yeah, those are
you said
three types. Yes.
But you've named two.
Oh, two. There's a third one.
I'm paying attention.
I've forgotten. You are paying attention.
Yes, I'm paying attention in class.
The third one is where it's called kinship adoption, where maybe you had a relative who passed on and they left behind their child, and you want to take up this child who you're connected to by virtue of blood relations. It doesn't have to be a sibling. It could also be an uncle, an aunt, a cousin. So that is what
just
we
a
call
relative.
Kinship. Yeah.
Okay.
Why there's a connection of blood, but there's a relationship, but it's not a mother and child or father and child, but it's blood relation.
Okay.
Yes.
Where do we categorize this type of adoption where, for example, I get married to you and I find you have a child, then as we are staying together, I opt to. I've seen people saying, I want to adopt a child, just like legally adopt this child. Where do we categorize that adoption? Because I've had people do that. So it's just not a stepfather arrangement, but this person goes a stepfather.
That will fall under the local adoption because you're a Kenyan and the child is a Kenyan.
Okay.
There's no blood relations, and unless you're falling in love with a foreigner, then again
that changes the narrative.
It changes the narrative.
Okay.
Yes.
What are the requirements when it comes to adoption in our country? And I'm asking for people who are married. I'm asking for people who are single. And the ones for foreigners. But I'll ask another follow-up question for because I tried adopting a child many years back. And I remember I was told I can't get it. I can't follow because I was single then. But years later, I think now it's 12 years, 10 years, I see single people adopting. Did the laws change?
The law has always been the same. Unless this was way before 2001, before the coming up of the Children's Act, 2001. Now we have another amended act, Children's Act 2022. We got a new Children's Act. Before that, we didn't have proper laws guiding the children. And so maybe that's why you were not able to adopt. But one of the requirements of adopting a child, again, I would presume, 14 years ago, maybe you are not at the right age.
Yes, no. Okay, despite age, I'm trying to figure out maybe this lawyer who knew me was trying to dismiss me. I don't know why I've always thought that. But when I asked people, they're like, no, in Kenya, if you're single, it's hard. But now over the years, especially the last 7 to 10 years, I've seen a lot of people who are single, who are celebrities, who are adopting and putting out. And people are like, oh, how did she do it? And they tell you, oh, it's her lawyer. The guy is tough. So we are trying to figure out, is it the person you know or your connections? Or is it favored or skewed to a particular category of people?
Well, there are requirements for one to adopt.
Yes.
And one of them is if you're a single person, you can only adopt a child of the same gender.
Oh, okay.
So if you are a lady, then
yes,
maybe you had wanted to adopt a boy,
okay,
a boy child. And so maybe that's why it did not work or you were discouraged from the process.
Even right now, it still works?
Right now, it's
okay,
one of the requirements that if you are a single lady, then you can only be allowed to adopt as a female child.
Okay.
If you're a male, you should only adopt, the requirement is for you to adopt a male child.
Yes.
Then there's a requirement on age that the age of a person adopting should be 25 years. There's a lower limit,
okay,
which is they should be 25 years of age. And there's an upper limit, which is they should be 65 years of age, between 25
and 65. Okay.
If you're above 65, then it will not, that application will not go through.
Yes, I get you.
And also, if you are under 25 years of age, that application will not go through. There's also the requirement that the age difference between the adopter, who is the person adopting this child, and the child being adopted should be 21 years of age.
Oh, okay.
The age difference.
Okay. At least, on the very least.
Yes.
Okay.
Very least should be an age difference of 21 years.
Yes.
Then we are looking at requirements for adoption.
Yes. I know there's general and then there's for everyone. And I like the part that you've said for singles, it has to be someone from the same gender.
Yes.
But the rest cut across from both sides.
Yes.
Okay.
Then the child being adopted has to be at least 6 weeks old.
Okay.
Yes.
I can't adopt a baby.
You cannot adopt a child who is unborn.
6 weeks. Okay, what if they're born? Okay, the reason I'm asking, and I know you're laughing about it, maybe there's this scenario. Let's just take this scenario. There is a girl who found herself pregnant. She's still in campus. Upon consultation with her parents, they're thinking that she needs to give birth to this child. And after giving birth, and there's a couple, maybe there's a Barbara Nebuchadnezzar on the side, they've been looking for a child. And this is just the right match. So now I wait for 6 weeks again. Or I don't know if I've been watching too many movies, but I see like in Western movies, someone gives birth, you're told, take the baby, I don't want to see them. You know those things. Don't laugh at me. I'm not watching so many. But I've always assumed that you're told to take them when they have been born, so that you start bonding with them early. So when you talk about 6 weeks and this child is bonding with their biological mother, how does that play out when we have the 6 weeks rules in Kenya?
So this is how it plays out. The other requirement for adopting a child is that one must have had a continuous, must have been in continuous care and control of a child for at least 3 months.
Okay.
And so if you're adopting a child and you immediately want to take up that child, then you not have fulfilled this requirement of having been in continuous care and control.
So that has to happen before you adopt.
Before you make that application, you need to have spent at least three months. You have bonded. You already know the child. The child knows who you are. The child does not cry whenever they are handed over to you. And so that's where, again, the 6 weeks requirement comes in. But also,
because 6 weeks is about 2 months.
2 months.
Yes.
It's actually 1 month and 2 weeks.
Yes.
And so that's a minimal period of time that you should have. The child should have been available.
Yes.
Yeah, and then this child should also be able to should have been declared ready for adoption or declared adoptable, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
Yes.
I have 2 questions on what you're saying. One, let me start with the one. You've said there's a requirement of at least, there's a requirement for about 3 months for you to take care of that child. Now, what do they mean by taking care? I know you've talked about bonding, but does take care mean financial maintenance, raising, or what do they mean by taking care?
It's more of the emotional connection that they'll be looking at. It's not financial.
Okay.
Because this child, let's take an example of a child who is already in, let's say, a children's home.
Yes.
In a children's home, there's already a system that is already providing for this child. It would be very difficult for you to now interrupt the whole system and decide, you know what, I'm going to provide financially to this child. And so you need to be in continuous care and control, which basically means you are visiting this child on a regular basis. They want to see. It's more of the emotional
Do they
connection.
Actually make an effort to see?
Yes, they make the effort, because one of the documents that will be required to file will be a report about your the adoption agency. They'll be requiring you to actually have spent time with this child.
Okay.
So that can only happen if the report can only take place if they send their persons who are in charge, their employees, to actually come and observe, and then they'll be able to make that report.
Okay.
Yes.
Now let's go back to the 6 weeks. You've said no child can be adopted unless they're above 6 weeks old. Now, despite that, are infants, is it possible to adopt an infant in our country?
It is an infant.
Yeah.
What age is this infant?
In infant, from what? Below 3 months?
Below 3 months. It is possible.
You know why I'm asking? There are a lot of ladies who've come to my DM and they tell you they're expectant, but they don't want to keep the child. And I'm always wondering, and because you know, I'm always trying to get them therapy to seek someone, but I'm always wondering why they're not able. And when you're talking, it hit me, maybe these are the avenues they have looked at and no one is able to adopt. Then also, it takes me to those who do surrogate. How does that work? Or the laws for surrogacy are different from the ones for adoption?
Those are different from adoption.
Okay.
Surrogate laws are different from the adoption laws.
Okay.
Because adoption laws are looking at permanent control
Okay.
Of parenting. Having full permanent control of a child, and becoming more of that child.
Okay.
And then the requirements are as simple as the child has to be a minimum 6 weeks. The parent must have spent at least a minimum of 3
months.
3 months under the control of this child, care and control of this child. Number 3, they need to have also, they must have gotten consent. If you're adopting as a couple,
Okay.
the other requirement is that your spouse or your partner should be able to have consented to the adoption in itself.
Also, both of you have to sign like documents to say you're in agreement.
Yes, that you're in agreement for this process to take place.
Okay.
The other requirement, again, if the mother or the father of this child is alive, they
Yes.
also need to consent. So you cannot just go and take up a
Surely
child.
you put this child in a children's home. We still need to ask you for consent, or rather, this child is being taken care of by the state. Surely, these laws, we still need consent from them.
Yes, you need.
But they're not
consent.
taking care of their children or their child.
If they're still around,
Is they still alive? You give.
yeah, you need to actually get their consent for.
So if they say
adoption.
no, the child remains in the home.
It remains in the home. But also we have situations where it's an underage. It's a child who gave birth to a child.
Yes.
And so this child, one, may not be able to raise this baby.
Yes.
And they may offer the child up for adoption, or you may want to step in and help them.
Yes.
And in the process of doing so, then you may need the consent of their parents, because this is a child.
So both of them, the person who impregnated her and the child also.
So first you will need, this is a child. So
Yes.
it's a 14-year-old who gave birth.
So who consents, the mother or the parents of the child?
So the mother and father of this 14-year-old child who gave birth. So the grandparents.
Yes.
And also you need consent. If she was
Because sometimes the parents can force, you know that.
Yeah, they can force. But also the father of this child. If this child is 14 who gave birth, is an underage parent.
Yes.
And maybe also the father is also underage. You
Yes.
need the consent of his father who is underage.
So we need
and the
consent from
parent.
6 people.
You need consent from 6 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you join the conversation, I'm still asking about requirements. Let me give Eliud a breather. Then I'll come back to find out if there are more requirements. I'd like you to plug into this conversation through our social media handles, SpiceFM KE on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you've ever had a question about the adoption process in Kenya, today is the day. We are ending the year with gifts. Maybe you do need a gift, and the gift could be a child.
Spice.
If you're just joining in, we are the adults in the room. Today's adults are you who's listening in. The advocate of the High Court. I think I've missed Karigo. I'm busy trying to put her name in my lips till I end up stammering. Wherever you are, I know you're listening to this show. Get out of my lips, Karigo. Go and enjoy your leave. Yes, if you're plugging in, it's actually 38 minutes past 8 o'clock. The show is Spice. The show is the adults in the room. And today we are talking to Mr. Eliud Ngugi, an advocate of the High Court. The conversation today is the adoption process in Kenya. Before we went to the break, we were talking about the requirements, and I know we haven't finished on them. Please shed more light on what requirements are needed if you're planning to adopt, whether you are a couple, a single person, or a foreigner.
I think the major one is where the child has to be declared free for adoption by the National Council for Children's Services.
How is that done?
That one.
Yes, because I'm wondering, how do they know? Eliud needs to be adopted. Barbara needs to be adopted.
There's a system. There's a system that guides most of the children orphanages, whereby they fill the information. And so part of that information is the declaration on whether some of these children are ready for adoption or not.
And if they're not in an orphanage, how do they get, or do you go somewhere and register them?
So you will be, when you're making the application, then one of the requirements is that a declaration. So you need a report from the National Council.
Okay.
To declare that child to be ready for
Fit
adoption.
for a fit. Okay.
Yeah, or free for adoption. That's the term used.
Or free for adoption.
Yes.
Yes.
Then the other requirement is that the prospective child to be adopted must either be an orphan, I don't know whether we had looked at that.
Okay.
Or abandoned, or whose parents, guardians, whereabouts cannot be traced within a period of at least 1 year.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Does the government do this thing? Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm asking, because I'm just thinking that some of these things are so absurd.
We are, but again, there's a whole...
I have seen an Eliud, baby Eliud.
Yes.
Now I have to wait for another year. They start investigating. This is why children are in the streets. I'm thinking this, in my opinion, we need to loosen some of these laws.
I believe that's why the process... You see, you're not adopting an animal.
Yes.
It's a human being.
Yes.
Every checks and every information has to be verified.
Okay.
And I believe that's why when you come to us as a lawyer, to us lawyers, and you are seeking to make that application, we will not tell you that will be done with this process within 6 months. It's a process.
So it can take years.
It can take years. It can take quite some time, because
I can lose hope or leave and change my mind along the way.
I believe if you love this child, you will not give up.
Remember, I've met this child. I've met baby Nebuchadnezzar, baby Nebu, whatever we're going to call this child. Yes. And then I come to you as a lawyer or an advocate for assistance. You tell me we have to do this 3 months thing. We're doing this 3 months thing. Then is that the time that you start doing the search for the 1 year, or we give it a year after that? How does it work? Or before that?
This happens before that. Before you even start off the visitation with the child.
Okay.
You need to have you need to find out. It's the way when you're buying a property, you need to do some due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find out whether this child
is free for adoption.
Are they declared free for adoption?
Okay.
Number 2, who are they? Are they just an orphan in a children's home?
Mm-hmm.
Or have they been abandoned? And so, or their parents they live in a home, but they normally go to their parents' home over Christmas.
Yes, I've seen such things. I've seen such things.
There are such institutions.
I've seen that actually in my church. That happens on their children's home.
So you need to have done that kind of due diligence. Otherwise, you may actually fall in love with a child, and you want to start off the whole process. And before long, then there'll be a third party objecting to you adopting their child.
So generally, when it comes to adoption, in your opinion or experience, estimate how long should someone prepare themselves psychologically? Be honest, authentic. Let that listener, that man, that woman know what they are getting into. How long, on the very least?
Between 1 to 2 years.
1 to 2 years.
So at least 1.5 years.
Okay.
You should be hopeful that we'll have finalized that process.
So if it's now, we're thinking about 2025. I'm looking at 2025. It's me.
Yeah, it's 2025.
Okay.
Yes.
As you said, if you are determined, you will still stay on course.
Yes.
So what other requirements are there?
So the third one is, suppose this child also, what we've given, that example, that this child goes home to their parents, which means they have parents. There must be willingness for this child to be offered up for adoption.
Or by their parents?
By their parent.
Okay.
So that's the other requirement.
So on this other aspect where we're having a minor who got a child, now that one is usually an exception?
Yeah, that's an exemption.
Okay.
Because you already know.
That the situation.
Yes. And the last one,
yes.
I had forgotten.
No
if
problem.
the child is, above 10 years of age, so the child will be 10 to 18 years.
Yes.
Or 17 years and a few months. You may need to know that this child will also consent. One of the requirements is that this child consents to being adopted by you. After
10 years, you get the child's consent?
Yes. One of the reports is a consent by the child. If the child happens to be 10 years and above, they will need to say whether they...
Within the 3 months that they've been bonding with you, whether they want to go with you or not.
As you make the application, which I believe is the next step that we'll be going into.
Yes.
As you make that application, this child need to consent. If they are above 10 years of age, they'll be able to say, yes. I want to be adopted by Barbara.
If you're just joining in, we're talking to Mr. Eliud Ngugi, an advocate of the High Court. When we come back, he's going to be taking us step by step as to how we are going to get to. I know some of you have been thinking about it, but today is one of those things you're going to ask yourself, do I want to go through with this process? Am I ready for the 2 years wait? Or maybe you have been yearning, but you don't have information. Today, we are giving you the information. Opine on this conversation through our social media handles, SpiceFM KE on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You could also call in on 0719 01 600. I'm the Duchess of Ikolomani. You are just joining in, have plugged in. We're having a conversation. We're having a conversation about the adoption process in Kenya. Many of us have had questions, but I've really never gotten a chance to air them out or to just ask those nitty-gritty things and find out more information. I'd like you to plug into a stream that is www.spicefm.co.ke, and of course you can opine on it or ask any question or query to Mr. Eliud Ngugi, who's an advocate of the High Court and also a friend of the show. We're talking about the adoption process. Before we went on the break, I wanted to know the steps, but as we were coming back, there's something I wanted to ask. Allow me to ask you that before we get to the steps. Who in Kenya is not allowed to adopt, or who cannot adopt within our laws?
Very simple.
Yes.
If you are below the age of 25, you cannot adopt.
Yeah, that's when you've mentioned.
If you are above the age of 65, you cannot adopt.
Mm-hmm.
If the age difference between you and the child is not at least 21 years.
Okay, despite those ones.
Despite, those ones.
Mm-hmm. Are there specific people in the society?
Yes, there are specific people. And one of those people who cannot adopt is one who's is of unsound mind.
Okay.
If you are found not to be of sound mind, but your mental health is wanting, or you have a mental illness, then it will be very difficult for that application to go through.
Yes.
The other persons who cannot adopt it outlines it. I was shocked to read about it. Homosexuals.
Oh, they're not.
Adopt. Yes.
In our country.
In our country.
Okay.
Actually, the Act says it precisely.
Is that something new, or is something that has always been there?
It has always been there.
Okay.
They cannot adopt.
Okay. Unlike other countries, I think the West they can.
In the West they can, but in Kenya they cannot.
Okay.
And then the other persons who cannot adopt are those who have a record of sexual offences conviction.
Okay.
So if you have been convicted in court before for sexual offence or an offence relating to drug trafficking, an offence relating to robbery with violence, or another offence relating to indecent assault.
Okay.
Of one under the age of 16. If you had assaulted someone who was under the age of 16.
Like a minor.
Yeah.
But if you have a corruption case, you can... No, I'm just asking. Corruption case, you can adopt.
You can adopt if you're corrupt in this country. It's not one of the requirements.
No, I'm just saying you've been convicted for a corruption case, but you finished, paid your time, but that one you can still adopt.
Yes, and the last one is indecent assault. If you have been convicted of having caused indecent assault involving infliction of grievous bodily harm.
Okay.
So this is basically if, for example, you were involved in a fight that led to maybe a grievous. Grievous is where it's such an extreme. Like
one of those people who fight in maybe bar fights or something like that?
Bar fight, and you actually
hurt someone.
Hurt some or broke someone's, grievous, something grievous.
Nose or hands or removed a tooth.
Yes.
These things are we here.
Yes.
Okay.
Then you'll be disqualified from this, from making an application for an adoption.
Okay.
And I think generally, when you ask about corruption cases, what the Act was looking at, and the drafters of this Act, was how best can they protect the children. Because we tend to say in the children's court that the best interest of a child is of very great importance.
Yes.
But we look at how safe is a child if they are they're in your custody, they are with you.
Okay.
Are you likely to molest them? Are you likely to inflict grievous bodily harm? Are you likely going to, to perform some sexual offenses
Against
that's what
them.
against them. That's what the act was looking at.
Okay.
And that's why these are some of the things that disqualifies an applicant from the whole process of becoming an adopter.
Yeah, understandable.
Yes.
Now let's talk about the steps of, we've talked about the requirements, who can and who cannot. What are the steps after I found out this is a requirement? What are the steps I need to take or I need to start doing when it comes to the adoption process?
I had, I think, 3 more.
Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Pardon me.
3 more
Yes.
requirements.
Yes.
And
Pardon me for that.
Yeah. Anything else? Which, apart from, we have talked about sexual offenses, talked about assault,
Yes.
causing bodily harm. One of the other things that would disqualify an applicant is if the adoption process is not in the best interest of the child.
How would that be identified?
So this is an open blanket requirement. If we look at a child and it will not be in the best interest. So for example, the child is disabled.
Okay.
And the children's officer's report shows that the environment to which you want or you intend to bring this child to is not this child's, it's not friendly to this...
to the needs of the child.
Yeah, to these needs of the child.
Okay.
Then this best interest of this child will actually cause to get this application allowed.
Okay.
And so that is another reason. And the last one would be where the applicant is a foreigner, and where the said applicant is a biological relative of the child.
Biological relative, they're not allowed to. I thought you said that can be under kingship. Remember when we were talking about the types of adoption?
Yes.
So when you're saying if the applicant is a biological relative of the child, you can't. How is that?
The wording of the act is where the applicant is a foreign applicant.
Okay.
Except where the said applicant is a biological relative of the child.
Remember, you have said earlier the types of adoption. There's local, there's foreign. I was paying attention in this class. Foreign, local, and then kingship. In kingship, this has to be a relative of someone who has a blood relation. Local is anyone who seeks or feels the need to. Foreigner is that particular person who is not from this country. Now, when you talk about the last requirement, you've talked about the foreigner and the one of with a clause of blood relative. Help me understand that.
I believe when
I'm the common mwananchi here today.
Common mwananchi.
Yes.
I'll come back to this, but the intention of this wording is that one of the requirements when you are adopting a child is that you need to appoint a guardian ad litem, who is more like a person who represents the interest of the child.
Okay.
Or who is quote unquote
the guardian ad litem.
Yes.
Okay.
Is looking at the interest of the child or is the child's lawyer.
Okay.
Who speaks on behalf of the child.
So you're the one who is hiring this lawyer. For example, I would like to adopt baby Nebuchadnezzar. Then I get a guardian for him. Maybe you. Then I also get my lawyer. That's what you're saying.
You have your lawyer.
Yes.
But one of the requirements in the process of adoption is that an application for a guardian ad litem, who is a that person,
yes,
to come and speak on behalf of a child, has to be appointed first.
Who appoints?
The court appoints.
Okay.
And so...
And I pay. It's a free thing from the court. No, it's good to ask. You need to start knowing what can... So the court appoints, is it on a charge or it's something that is catered by the government, or is it something that is given, is the cost is taken to the person who's adopting the child?
It's a cost taken up by the government.
Okay.
And so this guardian ad litem is more like a children's officer who comes in and actually is a neutral person who is looking really at the best interest of the child. So this guardian ad litem cannot be a biological relative of this child.
Yes.
So that's what this is what may make an application for an adoption
okay.
to fall or to fail if the guardian ad litem had not revealed that they are actually relatives to this child.
Oh, and that's what you're saying, and they cannot be a foreigner.
They cannot be a foreigner as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the process of adoption, do you think that someone can have this process without having a lawyer, or do you have to actually contract a legal officer to help you within this journey?
It's always advisable to go for professionals, and lawyers go to school and learn these things.
But do you see?
They understand the law.
Yes.
But more so, if you get an advocate who specializes in this area
Yes.
of adoption, even better, because they already they have a checklist for you. They'll
Okay.
be able to advise you even before you start off the process. They'll be able to tell you, this is what will be required of you. You actually fulfill this requirement. Maybe you need to make sure that you're spending more time. You may need to approach this children's home and start having a relationship. A professional will be better off helping you through this whole process compared to you showing up at our adoption centers to try and gather that information, and then through the process you end up not maybe missing out some of these requirements, and which might end up costing you not just financially or even time-wise, but it will cost you emotionally, because maybe you have created that relationship with this child.
Hold that thought. I need to go back. If you're just joining in, we are the adults in the room, and we are talking about the adoption process in Kenya. Have you ever thought about it? Plug into this conversation.
Spice.
This is a subject that many of us would like to know but don't have that information. Some of us, the information that we have, we've gotten it on TV, on movies, on telenovelas. But today we want us to just open our minds and have a conversation so that all of us can get to know. Share it with a friend. I'd like you to tell a friend if you have a question, a query that I have not asked, that you feel like, hey, I need to get answers. Please opine on it or ask through our social media handles, SpiceFM KE, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember, you can call in on 0719 01 to 600. Eliud, before we went to the break, you were talking, I had asked a question whether someone can do this process without a lawyer, and you were giving me the pros as to why. And you were telling me that when it comes to it, it is required or recommended you use a lawyer, because you could go there by yourself and it could get you into trouble, or it can cost you an arm and a leg because of lack of information. Please proceed from there.
Yes, you require an advocate to help you through the process.
Yes.
One who has specialized in that area, because it will even be easier for them to know which report is required. There are a number of reports which are required in your application for adoption.
Yes.
And so someone who regularly does this process will be best placed to assist you.
Yes.
Through it, yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about the step-by-steps of this. After I've known the requirement and I've looked for a lawyer and advocate who specializes in this field, what next?
What's next is that several things. You've already qualified.
Yes, I've qualified.
Who and whether the child can be adopted.
Yes.
There will be a requirement for you to file an application for an adoption, which will be required to be supported by several reports. And one of the reports required will be a report made by the duly registered adoption society, recommending that an adoption order be made. So there are adoption societies in Kenya which have been registered.
Okay.
And so
are those same as adoption agencies?
Yes.
Okay.
So that agency report will be required to support your application. And in this application, you also need the consent. If you are married, you need the consent, more of an affidavit by your partner.
What if we walked in there together? To my lawyer, my advocate, to the agency, I'll still need a consent?
You need working together, the question is, are you married?
Yes. Oh, so you want to see the marriage certificate?
We need to see the marriage certificate.
Okay, fine.
Not just two friends who met and
wearing
decided
rings.
and decided, let's adopt.
Okay.
Yeah, so you need to have that supporting documents showing that if it's Barbara who is adopting, then your husband does not object to you, and they are aware that you are going to undertake this whole process.
It's not a couple thing that I can say my husband and I, or because you said something, if it's Barbara adopting, I thought it's a couple thing. So both of us say, I, Barbara Mbaka, and Eliud, blah, blah, blah. Or is it that adoption, it's one person and the other partner supports?
It could be one person adopting.
In a relationship?
In a relationship, you've decided, I am
Those
the one making
happen.
the application, yes. Or it could be...
Oh, that's why you're asking for consent.
You're asking for consent.
But I thought if you're married, you'll do it together. Isn't the child going to be living, or rather having a father and a mother? That's the narrative that is coming across.
There are individuals who decide to walk in, and they have chosen, and they have said, you know what, let's get an advocate together, let's adopt.
Okay.
So we, Barbara and Eliud,
yes,
wish
to adopt.
But
now there's an instance where Eliud just walks in alone.
No.
So Barbara is giving consent. Because that is how it sounds.
Yes, that's how it looks like. But that's just the requirement. So let's say, for instance, you're married.
Yes.
And your partner does not reside in the country.
Okay.
And so you have a marriage certificate. You qualify all these other aspects. Your partner probably works in DRC, Congo. Mm-hmm. I wanted to use a country in
Somalia.
No, a country that is doing the football tonight.
Or Qatar.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they live there and work there and reside there, and you are here in the country and you need to make that application. In such an instance, all you will need is, because your partner may not be able to attend some of these sessions,
yes,
all you need is a supporting document from your partner.
Like I, Eliud, blah, blah, blah. I mean,
I am married to this person.
Okay. Like an affidavit.
An affidavit.
Okay.
And then present it there. Then you need, this is a child that you're adopting. We had said that you need consent from the parent.
Yes.
Or the guardian of this child, showing that they are liable to contribute to the maintenance of the child.
And in what sense? What do you mean I'm liable? I need to give you my pay slip, I need to give you my contract, or I need to tell you I run a business. What do you mean by I'm liable to take care of this child?
What we mean is that if you're taking up the adoption and you have decided to take up this child to make this application, we are looking at the parent of this child who are liable initially.
Yes.
Or it was a children's home. So there was a guardian taking care of this child.
Yes.
And they were taking this financially and supporting this child and everything. That's a consent that we are requiring from these individuals.
Okay.
So if, and in this case, maybe the child is out in a children's home, the directors of this children's home need to consent and say yes.
So they are aware this application is
this
happening.
Application is happening.
Okay.
Then once you have these applications and the supporting documents, you will proceed on and file this in court.
In what? Please repeat that.
You'll be required to file this application at the High Court.
Okay.
Not just any court.
Not these courts that are in the...
No, not in the small claims court or in the children's court.
But in the High Court.
But in the High Court.
Okay.
That's the only court that has been given jurisdiction to deal with adoption cases.
Okay.
And once that's filed in court, then an application for the guardian ad litem has to be made.
Okay.
And this application will probably go through the hearing motion where the person will be adopted. Probably they'll be listed there. And remember, they cannot be blood relatives of this child. And when they are listed there, then it will be approved and they will be incorporated into this hearing in the High Court. And then now you go into the details of the main adoption case, which is just going through whether all the requirements have been met. And so the judge is going to look through that application. Your lawyer is going to argue out that you have met those qualifications. And once that's finalized, the judge is going to sit back and just write a judgment and say, I have been convinced that so-and-so meets the requirement of adopting this child called Y or Z.
Okay.
And one of the prayers that people make is that the child being adopted be issued with a birth certificate.
Another one
that comes out with your name, for example.
But aren't we faking it now?
We are faking it.
It's lies. Those are lies.
We want to have full custody and control of this child. And so you may choose to even change the name of the child. So the child maybe was called Angel, but you actually want to give that child these particular names. You have name as a surname and an order.
I like the part that you reminded me on the previous hour, that the court and our systems looks at the interest of the child. This child maybe is 8 years old, has been called Brianna all her life. Now, Eliud has decided to adopt this child. Eliud and Mary decide to change this narrative and say this child should be called Angel. The court does not see the interest of the child here. Can you call Brianna so and so, then we put Ngugi at the end? But changing the name, isn't that extra?
Well, that's what comes with adoption.
So someone can change someone's name.
It's you having legal rights over the child.
And changing a birth certificate.
You change that birth certificate.
But this child had a life.
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask that question. Just finish, because it's a question, you've seen how where I'm going. But I'll ask these questions for the future when it comes to these children asking where they are from.
Well.
And here you are changing birth certificates with your lawyers and the Kenyan courts. We are being funny.
We said that adoption is a process which a child is permanently placed with a legal parent.
Yes.
Permanent. So legally. Yes.
So everything is going to be done to ensure that it is permanent and legal.
It's permanent and legal, and that's why the process.
Do we tell the child, out of just curiosity, that now that you're going with Eliud and Mary, and I'm the guardian, do we tell the child that your name is going to be changed? This is going to happen to you. And if the child along the way says, I don't want my name changed. Remember you told me this child can consent and feels like, no, this is a bit too much, and leaves. So if the child says no and doesn't give consent for them to be adopted, that the process stop.
What we are looking at is...
Because maybe I like my name.
What we are looking at, one, we said an adoptable child is one who is around 6 weeks old.
Yes. Those ones don't have a say.
We don't have a say. But
this one is 6 years old or 8.
This one who is 6 or 8 also, it seems like they don't have a say.
So up to 10 years old is when I can have a say. If I'm above 10, I can say, no, I don't want to go.
Yes, because a 10-year-old is required to consent. And so there will also be some supporting document.
So they can consent not for their name to be changed. And the law will listen to it.
The law will also look at, is there a birth certificate for this child? Because if, for example, you're adopting a child from a kin, so it's a child that is your cousin's.
Yes.
And you now want them to be yours.
Yeah.
And you're adopting them. And for so long, they were known as Angel. It is through that whole aspect of looking at the best interest of this child. How best can they... One of the best interests of the children is a right to a name.
Yes.
So this right to a name is basically... going to be very helpful, because what if this child was called, let's say, had a name from Guinea, or had a name from Morocco?
Ugo Chuku.
Yes, such a name.
From Nigeria.
Yes. You see, if you actually, their best interest, and they're being adopted by Barbara from Ikolomani, the best interest would be for them to not have to explain to anyone where they have a name from
And live different country.
a different country.
Okay.
So that's one of them.
Okay, I get you. Maybe the child is called Nyambura, and where I come from, Ikolomani, there's no Nyambura.
Yes.
So we have to look for a name that suits them to fit in.
Yes.
Man, adoption is a process. Next step.
So you have already made a prayer. The judge is going to make a judgment, and you will have the adoption issued in your favor. Prayer.
Is this the part that we wait for 1 year, or the 1 year usually is on the court process? Because Kenyan courts really know how to drag, and I'm sorry, and I'm talking the truth. They can drag your case. So is this within the 1 year, or after the prayers has been said, it is an automatic that you will get the child?
This is within
the 1-2 year thing.
The 1-2 year thing, because we are asking ourselves. See, also the court is not just waiting for your application. There are many other applications.
I like how the court wants to pretend they're so busy, even if they are busy.
Judges also want to go on leave. Sometimes they fall sick.
Yeah, I've had cases where judges have gone on leave.
They have to go for some retreats, official
then they
duties.
Come back, they change you to another court. They have been reassigned.
So some of these factors which are not in our control may affect how long the duration of a hearing of your application may take.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're just joining in, we are the adults in the room. We're talking about the adoption process in Kenya. I'm telling you, an hour ago, if you told me it is this long, I would not have believed that it is a very long and I don't say tedious process, but at the end of it, it will be fruitful. I'd like you to opine on this conversation. If you have questions about it, send them through SpiceFM KE on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. We have an advocate of the High Court, Mr. Eliud Ngugi, who is shedding light and giving us more information that maybe some of us take for granted or assume that we know. But today, as they say in Swahili, mtajua jui when it comes to adoption.
Spice.
Joining in, we are the adults in the room. Today's adults are you who's listening in, Mr. Eliud Ngugi, an advocate of the High Court, and of course I, the Duchess of Economani. The conversation we're having today is the adoption process in Kenya. Many of us have heard about it. Many of us have thought that it's for a particular group of people. But I like how we've broken it down that anyone and all of us can adopt. It is not segregated. You just need to follow the requirements. And if you did not hear them, trust me, we're going to put the clip online and on YouTube. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Someone is saying, I'm joining the family, pole kwa kuchelewa, but I am really learning a lot. Thank you for that, Teddy Brown. Zachary, I see you. You're saying the topic is very good and informative. Wycliffe says, this is informative. Asante sana. Now, we've talked about the requirements. We've talked about the process, and you talked about where the judge has says, I now declare that this is your child. Upon the process, and then I feel like, I don't feel like this thing. My heart, my ancestors or my spouse is against it. Can I change my mind? And is there a fine for that? Things can happen. Or maybe we divorced with my partner, and he had already given consent, and I'm thinking, I can't raise this child.
At what point are you saying that you can proceed?
Towards the end. Or maybe now we're in the final stages where now the judge is reviewing. Then we have realized, me and my Nebuchadnezzar, life is hard. I am not sure I want to raise this child alone. Can I actually withdraw my application if it's a couple? And can the court also grant me a solo one without him, now that his consent is like, I'm no longer into this?
It goes back to several factors. One of them being, what's the best interest of a child? But two, does the withdrawal of this, let's say your partner, Nebu, affect your ability to raise this child? Number three, are you in your right mental state? and are you emotionally stable to proceed and adopt this child?
Okay.
But if you make a request to the court will grant that request and we withdraw the case.
Okay.
Because the court does not force people to proceed on with processes which they are not willing to take.
Okay.
But also, your husband who decides to, maybe if they are divorcing you or they decide to separate and there's some issues, one of the things that may come out is that then you will not be in a very a stable place to proceed and take up a child.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of the claims that may have been lodged against you.
Yes.
Now, let's put a family or a person has decided to adopt. Along the way, they get this child, they've done the 3 months, then I stay with this child. And remember, you told me adoption is a legal permanent procedure.
Yes.
I'm thinking after 6 months, Eliud is not the child, I already did the 3 months, I've waited for and it's already a permanent procedure. Can someone go back? Because we've had people of saying they're not stable, they're not happy, they don't think this was them. Does the court allow such things?
You can adopt a child at any point.
But can you change? Like, I got the child, I've been granted the child, a year in or 6 months in, I don't feel
you want to return the child back.
Yes. Is that allowed?
That is not allowed.
Okay. So people need to know that if you take the child, it's your responsibility till the end.
To the end. But then what the law provides for is where you are not granted the child, your application for adoption is not granted.
Okay.
In that case, then you can make an appeal. You can go back to court and say, I'm appealing this decision. I think I'm qualified to become a parent to child number A. And then the court will review your documents. Is this the part that you go to the
Supreme Court or you do a court of appeal? This is Kenya. Where do you go? To the same High Court?
No, you go to the Court of Appeal.
Okay.
To make your application for an appeal, stating your reasons why you think maybe the judge in the High Court was not fair in making a decision that you did not qualify to become an adopter.
Do they make a ruling of it that as the reason as to why they have not agreed or they're rejecting your adoption process?
Yes.
Okay.
It's part of a judgment because the judgment may either be positive or negative.
Okay.
It's likely to say, yes, you qualify and we are granting you the prayer and also the birth certificate in the name.
Oh, it comes hand in hand together.
Hand in hand, if you had requested for it.
Okay.
Spice.
But then also if it fails, the application fails, then the judge is able to say, we shall not allow your application to adopt the child called A, XY. We also protect the identity.
Okay.
And so we are not granting for these reasons. Number one, that maybe you do not qualify because of your age. The Children's Officer's report, the Adoption Society's report, shows that you do not have the capacity because, again, there are some of the things that the adoption institutions have to look at whenever you go for those interviews when they come for interviews.
Yes.
So they will come to your house, they will look at where do you reside, they will ask for your payslip and ask you how much you make.
It's a bit intrusive.
No, it's quite important because they want to know whether you have a capacity to take care of the child that you intend to take take up.
Okay, I get where you're coming from with the capacity, but is there a particular pay slip they're looking for? Because maybe there's a Nebuchadnezzar who will earn 50,000, another John will earn 150, and another one is doing 700 and another one 30. So will they be disqualified because of their income, or what exactly are they looking for?
We're just looking at the capacity. The Nebuchadnezzar could be making 10,000, but they are able to buy diapers.
Okay.
And they are able to provide for this child. Another Nebuchadnezzar could be making 700,000, but they have mortgages and loans, and they have no capacity.
So they look at they look at it in detail.
We are looking at it in detail, whether you are able to provide for the child. We will also look at how fit are you to provide for this child. So, for example, questions about what you do during your free time, what you do for a living. Maybe you travel a lot, then you might be disqualified from adopting because you might not be present to raise this child who might be 1 year old.
And who needs more of your attention.
It needs more of your attention. And so some of these things will happen. Some of these questions will come up during your interview, and they will ask you these questions and then come up with this report. And in this report, once filed in court, this is why the judge may decide you're not qualified to be granted the prayer of adopting the child. Because one, we have seen that maybe you have no capacity to actually provide for this child.
What are the rough estimates? And I know you didn't want to answer these questions, you dodged it, but I'll ask again. What are the rough estimates when it comes to the cost of adopting, or rather the adoption process?
The estimates
Per child.
Per child.
Yes.
Actually, you should have asked me where you can adopt several children.
Yes, because
because
I hear that happens. That's why I said per child. I'm going there.
The estimates depend on who you are, who is representing you, who is your counsel.
There are no fixed.
There
are no fixed rates, like the way you know that this charge is for this. Maybe you're doing a dead poll, things like that.
We're given a structure on how to bill.
Okay.
And this we call it advocate's remuneration order. So this schedule is able to inform how we can charge, and it only gives a bare the below requirement of how much we can charge. And because it's a high court case that will be going to the high court.
Or high court cases are billed differently.
Are billed differently from the small claims court and the chief magistrate's court's cases. And so depending with it's all dependent on the relationship you have with your lawyer, and even the complexity of your case, because again, each case is different. You may have a case that may require us to be in court for more than those 2 years.
Okay.
Someone else may have a straightforward case and they have proper documents and may be easier. So for example, if let's say you it's a kinship type of adoption, kinship kind of adoption, it will be straightforward because
this at the local
you're able to show there's a blood relation, and so this is quite easy. We do not expect any objections. We just expect that once we file our paperwork, then the judge will proceed and allow that, compared to a foreign adoption, whereby there will be issues to do with how are you in Kenya. Are you in Kenya through a work permit, or are you in Kenya through a visitor's visa or visitor's pass or marriage? How are you in the country? And so some of these factors will be considered in this whole process, and you may find yourself being told we need to take some more time, we need to review some of these documents, and so the case may take longer.
Talking about complexities, there are two complexities that I want to ask. Let's start with the first complexities. You talked about adoption agencies in Kenya. Do they allow us to adopt more than one child at a time, or the procedure has to be different?
The Act provides for adoption of a child, and the qualifications are there. And so I've seen cases whereby you fall in love with triplets, and you decide to actually make an application.
You don't want them to separate. You don't want to separate.
You don't want to separate them.
Yes.
And the question will be, do you meet the requirements? And the requirements are, do you have, for example, if the adoption agency comes to interview you and to prepare that report, do you meet these requirements? Do you have the capacity? Are they going to be well taken care of? Is the best interest of the children to be raised together as triplets? And so you can adopt more than one child.
Okay.
And so as long as you meet all the requirements, the age difference and all these other requirements.
Okay, when we talk about foreign adoption or the foreign type of adoption, and for example, we have one party or both parties who are foreigners, maybe they visited Kenya, in between their escapades and their visitation, they fall in love with a child. As they start this particular process, do you have to inform their country or their embassies about certain things?
For the foreigners who...
Because they plan at some point, maybe their work permits are ending in 2 years. So at some point, they might go back home. So how do we handle such matters? So
this is, again, best interest of the children.
Yes.
They are not limited, but initially for a while...
Because you can't go to see where they might be going.
Yes. But the question is there a home? Because one of the requirements, again, is a report to show where are these children going.
Okay.
Is there a stable home? What is the environment like? So this is one of the requirements.
So the home is here, or I'll tell you the home because I'm adopting, and then after the process, I want to go with baby Eliud to America or to Swaziland or South Africa. So the report I'm giving you, is it for the home that is in South Africa or the home that is here locally as I'm staying, as I'm doing the adoption process?
The adoption process is based on the Kenyan law.
Okay.
And it's based on the Kenyan agencies which come to you and interview and look at where the children are going to go to.
Okay.
And so if you do not have a home here, it will be very difficult for you to proceed and do this whole process. But we've had situations whereby foreigners come in and they're interested in adopting a child.
They do a Madonna on us.
A Madonna, but that's why at some point we've had a moratorium that stopped any foreign adoptions because of the whole child trafficking issue.
Okay.
Some of the people will not reveal the information, will not reveal their intentions, and some of them would have ill intention when they were adopting. And so that was stopped, has been stopped for quite some time.
Okay.
And so
now foreign adoptions are on pause.
Okay. But local ones and kinship ones are ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about foster care and adoption. What's the difference, and is foster care practiced in Kenya?
Foster care in Kenya is different from adoption.
Okay.
And the reason I say so is because foster care is where you decide to provide a temporary home for a child.
Oh, so the word is temporary for some time.
It is temporary for some time.
Okay.
And this is to make sure that you meet the needs of a child and maybe even security. So, for example, if you are driving out here this evening and you came across a child who had been abandoned there, that will not amount, if you take them home, it does not amount to adoption.
Okay.
There's
am I allowed to do that out of curiosity? Like the law will not come after me?
So it will be at night.
Yeah.
So you may decide, let me take this child and report to the police. And the police may tell you, our station does not have a warm place for this child. Why don't you go home, tell us where you live, go home, and then tomorrow come back to the station. That would be foster.
Okay.
And we have some children directors who are able to make a report. They will allow you to actually take care of a child temporarily for a certain period of time, and they will make a report about the child. But you have no control over this child.
What if I wanted to adopt the child? Can the state or the system allow me, now that I had been fostering, can I be allowed to adopt such a child?
Yes, you can be allowed to adopt that child, but then the process again comes in.
And during that process, I'll still be having the child, or they'll take the child away from me?
The state may not allow you to have a child unless it does not have.
That's why people don't.
There are some foster homes that are in place for such.
Also, if you want, you can adopt, but they'll take the child away from you.
They'll take the child away from you, but then you can create that relationship by visiting the foster homes. Or they may place these children now to a children's home, and then now you can go through the whole process.
So that you start the process afresh.
Yes. The reason is they are trying to protect the children. We don't want
they
you to
were not protecting
abuse.
that children from the street. I'm done. Yeah. These laws of ours. Even you know in your heart, this is someone who's just become a good Samaritan.
Yes, but again, that's why
the state cannot protect them.
That's why we have rules, and maybe the state was not aware that this child had been abandoned somewhere in a bush. But now that you have brought that information to them, then they'll be willing to say, okay, we have a system. But in situations and in, let's say, in counties whereby these foster homes are not there,
yes,
then they may allow you for a short, temporarily. That's the word.
So you will be given, but temporarily.
Yes.
Okay. And now this is something that I want you to think about, because I've seen it happen. I talked about maybe someone marries, and whoever you marry comes with a child. And you being the other parent, you just don't want this stepfather relationship. You want to go the extra mile and adopt this child. And of course, you told me that is more of a local adoption and nothing to do with kingship. Now, when it comes to that, and this child already has a name, has a father, biological father somewhere, but because Eliud is getting married to Mary, and Mary loves Eliud with all her heart, and Eliud has this child called Nebuchadnezzar. Mary is thinking of adoption. But there is a mother called Barbara. Mama ya Nebuchadnezzar. And Mary wants to adopt my child. And you told me it comes with this birth certificate. You people want to change my child's name. Does the law allow Mary and you, or even vice versa, for this child's name to be changed to be in your family name? Maybe it was a woman. Let's now even give it a scenario so it's a practical one. The woman is the one who had the child. Mary has a child. So you're adopting Nebuchadnezzar, and you want Nebuchadnezzar to be, maybe Nebuchadnezzar was called Nebuchadnezzar Kamau. Now you want the child to be called Nebuchadnezzar Ngugi, and their father are alive. In terms of changing the name, how does that go? And is it allowed? And do you still need consent from the biological parent? Remember, you told me names have identity. I pay attention in the class.
How old is this child? Nebuchadnezzar?
Oh, so the age matters?
This
Give me both
age-
scenario.
Let me give you.
Let's imagine there's a 3-year-old and then there's an 11-year-old.
Okay. The age factor is matters a lot. There's an act we call the Births and Deaths Registration Act of Kenya.
Yes.
This act provides that you can change the name. I think it's section 4. That you can change the name of a child before the child turns 4 years of age.
Yes, I've heard about that.
And if a child is over the age of 2 years of age, then what will be required of you to do is to swear a deed poll.
Yeah.
And so in such a scenario, if you had this child who came with your partner and you really want to adopt this child,
I want this child to be mine.
To be mine.
To be a Ngugi.
So you want the birth certificate to reflect the name Ngugi.
Yes, you don't want to see Kamau, because even Mary is changing her name.
Yes.
Everyone in this house has to be Ngugi.
They're becoming yours.
Yes. Ownership.
Ownership.
Yes. Men love ownership.
It's an African thing.
It's very dangerous.
So when we decide to, in such a situation, in such a scenario, my advice to the person is, first we need to find out from the biological father of this child whether the father consents to the name change.
Okay.
So in this,
even the mother
case,
has to be asked if the case was reversed.
Yes.
Okay.
So they need to be alerted and informed on that, because we have a ruling on that. That's the name. There was a judgment in this country a few years ago that said that you cannot remove the name of a biological father from the birth certificate. So you cannot go out there rubbing the names. And so
very unfair. Okay, fair to men, but very unfair.
And so
I almost thought I would do that maybe in another lifetime.
No. So if this man wants to own this child and to own the wife, and they want the name to be reflected on the birth certificate,
we just add it.
The question will be, is a biological father consenting to that? Because if he does consent, in our case, then you can go through the process of adoption, because the adoption application will have a prayer, and this will be the kinship. It will be a local application. Adoption will then make a prayer that a new birth certificate be issued in the name of the applicant. But if the father is not willing to adopt this name, if he refuses not to adopt, to change the name of his child, you already moved on, but the father says, no, that's still my child, then there's no option but to wait maybe for the child to turn the age of majority. That's and then 18. he can come to me, and then we can prepare a deed poll. Okay.
Yeah. But there's also this aspect of adoption. Would the process of adoption be allowed to go on even without the change of name?
Yes.
Even if the father or the mother is alive, you can still adopt the child.
You can adopt the child. Again, the question is, one of the requirements is that adoption process has to be consented by the biological parent. So if you have remarried and you are in a new relationship, it will be very difficult for you to now try and cut this relationship from your former relationship and decide.
Unless they just they're not interested, and they're like, whatever happens, sign off.
Unless they are not interested, but it will be very difficult to then choose to adopt a child whereby the father, the biological father, is alive, and they have decided not
So unless they approve or they are deadbeat and they're not interested in the child,
yes,
and they sign off, then the adoption can go through.
then that can go through.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're just joining in, this is SpiceFM. The show is The Adults in the Room. We've been talking to Mr. Eliud Ngugi, and the conversation is about the adoption process in Kenya. If you have any queries, I see some of your queries, and some have been answered. I hope they have been answered to your satisfaction. Plug into this conversation through our stream, that is www.spicefm.co.ke. I'm the Duchess of Ikolomani. Stay tuned.
Spice.
The Adults in the Room, 7 minutes to the top of the hour. Today's guest is Mr. Eliud Ngugi, an advocate of the High Court, and the conversation we have is the adoption process in Kenya. Many of us think it's a very easy thing. I can do it. I've had people say, "Hey, nikita kwa easy. Unaenda tu unafanya." I hope you've been listening keenly. It's actually a process, and you need to be very keen if you are thinking about it. We have many people who have been thinking about it because of many because. And I like when we started the conversation, Eliud brought to the fore and reminded us that people who are childless, the people who just are in love with children or would love to help out people. So adoption is not specified for a particular category of people. Now, talking about adoption, and we've talked about the complexities, we've talked about the requirements, the steps. Now, in the event a parent has given consent that, hey, a biological parent, and this child maybe was adopted when they are young, maybe they're in an orphanage, and their parents were still alive, and they give consent for their child to be adopted. A few years down the line, as the Lord and the Spirit would touch you, Mr. and Mrs. Ngugi decide, you know what? We need to go and pay Barbara a visit, and we need to see our child, and they need to connect. How can I, as Barbara, protect myself from these people? Because remember, you have reminded me, adoption is a legal and permanent process. Is it right for that couple to do that, given that they gave consent? And then can they fight, or after a month or two, can they come back and say, we made a mistake and would like to fight through, and because we're the biological parents?
No, they cannot come and change their minds and decide to retract their consent, because under the odds and statutory act, whenever you swear and you consent, you are not just doing it just for the sake of it. It's not a joke. It's a child play where you just decide, oh, it's just a signature, and you sign off. It is something taken with a lot of weight when you actually swear and consent and say, yes, I accept. And so you cannot retract.
What if it was a minor? Remember when we were talking about the aspect of this was a minor, a child, and the parents consented, and even she consented. But now, 5 years in, she's reached 21, and she's looking for legal advice, and she's like, yes, I did because I was a minor, but I would like to raise my child. Can the court look into that?
No. This is why, because one of the reasons that we gave is that there must be consent by the parent of this minor.
So your parent supersedes everything?
Supersedes everything. And there was a guardian ad litem who was looking at the interest of this child. And so if at that point there was no ground raised, unless now this child comes and says there was coercion. So she was forced to actually sign off. They were forced, maybe they were intimidated, and they were told, if you don't give up this child, then we shall.
So that's when the court can look into it.
Then the court may look into that and say, oh, why didn't this information come up then when we were hearing the case? And so you give your proper reason and say maybe they even blocked and we made it hard for you to appear in court or speak up. So maybe in such a situation, then the court has no option but to review the order of adoption.
But it's actually just in special cases.
These are very, very special cases, and that's why the court will take quite some time when it comes to adoption cases. It will not rush through them.
That's why it takes long.
It will take long to just allow this deliberation, this thinking, allow these reports to be adopted, because even this child consented, then the adoption agency was then wrong to not have found out that there was an issue with the whole consenting of his minor
coercion
child.
and manipulation.
And all these other things. So these are some of the issues that, but this is why we have more reports required to support your application, because the judge is able to look through some of these applications and see that there's something fishy or there's something not making sense and not allow that adoption application.
Does the judge interview people in person during this particular process when you filed your application?
Yes, the adoption process takes place physically.
Okay.
So you show up in court.
Your lawyer can go to court, then I'll wait for the feedback.
No, we say that the court does not operate in a vacuum.
Okay.
That it will just be the lawyer and the guardian, and then the party is interested in adopting, and then the mother of the child has been left maybe away.
Okay.
Or maybe it's a child from a children's home, and then the only people there are just those few people. No, the court will have to look through the documents, listen to the presentations being made by the lawyer, and then proceed and make that determination.
Thank you so much for making time to see us. If anyone has more questions about this process of adoption or any other thing, how can they reach you?
They can reach me on my social media, Eliud Ngugi, or info@ngugimboru.com.
That is across all social medias?
Across all social medias, it will be Eliud Ngugi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in. For everyone who has sent the question, asante sana. For those who plugged in, we appreciate you. And tunasema, if you are thinking about that process, well, maybe this is the time to start or kickstart that process. On behalf of the Spice team, I wish you a good night. God bless you. Make sure you plug in the morning, 6 a.m. for Situation Room. You know, after that, from 11, we have the mid-morning show. Then you plug into the Spice Drive with Edward Quach. And of course, tomorrow, same time, the Duchess of Ikolomani. Good night, darlings. Mwah.
Spice.